Hey guys, Ultimate here, and today the G is gonna get dynoed. All right. If you haven't already been keeping up with me so far, I've been repairing a lot of leaks. I've replaced my lower oil pan, my oil cooler, my valve covers, my camshaft sensors. I just done everything maintenance-wise needed, my power steering fluid, to get the car ready to finally get dynoed. Okay. Now that the car is up to speed in maintenance, it is now healthy, no check engine light, not that I have one anyway, but everything is for the most part in its best shape it's going to be. So now it is ready to be dynoed. All right, again, let's talk about what a dyno is. A dyno is a type of system that measures how much horsepower and torque you are generating at your wheels. Okay, so the first thing you need to know here is that you have something called brake horsepower and wheel horsepower. Supposedly this is the VQ35DE with the manual transmission. If you have the VQ35DE with the automatic, they supposedly make 260 horsepower, 260 foot-pounds of torque. If you have the manual transmission DE, this is the non-rev up, by the way, you can see there, non-rev up, we are making 280 horsepower, 270 foot-pounds of torque. Okay. As your car is generating power from here, this is a rear-wheel drive setup. We'll talk about drivetrain loss in a minute, but your engine produces power. It goes to your transmission, through your drive shaft, hits your differential, and then it splits off at the axles, and then we get our power here at the wheels. Okay, so one thing you're going to realize is that your brake horsepower is going to be, your wheel horsepower is going to be reasonably lower than your crank horsepower. Okay, I forgot to mention something here. Dynos measure torque, and then horsepower is calculated. It has numbers, I can't really explain it, but basically dyno measures torque. Usually if you have front wheel drive, you have a 10 to 15% drivetrain loss. If you have rear wheel drive, it's usually somewhere between 18 to 25% drivetrain loss. And if you have four wheel or all wheel drive, it is usually about 20 to 30% drivetrain loss, because there's so many moving components. All right, another thing that affects your drivetrain loss is the transmission you have. My car is a 6-speed. If you have an automatic, automatics notoriously have a little bit more drivetrain loss than manuals do. Manuals are direct drive, meaning that the power transfer is direct, whereas automatics use fluid pressure. Using fluid pressure, you're going to lose some power. That's just how automatics are. Back then, a lot of cars would give you horsepower numbers and torque numbers for your manual transmission and your automatic transmission. A lot of modern cars don't do that anymore. I don't know if they just don't care, or manuals are just so uncommon nowadays, they just don't care to even give you that information. All right, another thing we're going to talk about that affects your dyno is your temperatures. All right, the hotter it is, and your elevation affects oxygen. Okay, the hotter it is, the less oxygen there is. It's about 72 degrees, 73 degrees today. It's not too bad, it's actually pretty temperate, but the hotter you go, the more oxygen you lose. They say every 10 degrees you lose about 1% of horsepower, supposedly. And then as you go up in elevation, if you live in the mountains, you lose more oxygen. There's less oxygen in higher elevation places. Last things I want to talk about is the type of dyno we're going to be doing. You have two types of dynos. So there are two types of dynos people usually use. You have the chassis dyno and you have the hub dyno. We're going to be doing a chassis dyno. So what they're going to do is they're going to strap down the car, and with the wheels still on, there's going to be rollers that the tire has to spin on, and then that will give us our reading. If you have a hub style dyno, they'll take the wheels off, and there's a hub that's like a machine that bolts up to the hub, and then it'll spin with these packs connected to it. So one thing I was going to sit here and say is that the hub dyno might be a little bit better as far as drivetrain loss is concerned. I don't have that option, but either way, I want to have things as real world as possible. Your tire size and the rim size do affect how much drivetrain loss you have. The bigger your rim is, usually the more drivetrain loss you'll have. Heavier rims make the car go slower for the most part. Lighter, smaller rims, help with drivetrain loss. Not only that, we are on stock tires. I'm not 100% sure how much the width of the tire affects performance, but on the G35 sedans, they have 215 side width tires, and then they have 17-inch rims. If you have a coupe rims are usually about 18s, and they're a little bit wider. They're probably 225, 235. So I don't know how that affects horsepower or not, but just giving you guys some information. For the most part, this car is stock. I have 3 mods technically. I have the 5/16 intake plenum spacer. I have the lightweight crankshaft pulley, if you've seen any of my earlier videos, and I have a Z1 midweight flywheel clutch kit. For the most part, the crankshaft pulley and the lightweight flywheel don't really affect horsepower that much. I mean, they kind of do, but think about, like, if you ever been on a bench or something and you're curling weight, just because you're lifting a heavier weight doesn't change how strong you are. If you change that same weight and make it smaller, you can curl that weight faster. So in all essence, it should increase horsepower a little bit, but for the most part, these are just drivetrain restorations. Like, this reduces parasitic drag on the serpentine belt by making the crank lighter. It reduces how much power the engine has to use to turn on my accessories, and with the flywheel in the back, it being lighter, helps the engine spool up faster, and again, the engine doesn't have to turn as much weight, which helps with drivetrain loss. So technically speaking, besides this plenum spacer, this engine is completely stock. I want it that way, and I want to show how, as we begin to mod this car and throw parts at it, how those things will look from stock and after. I mean, before and after. Another thing that the dyno will help me understand is that this car is old, I'm not gonna lie. A dyno will kind of show how healthy your engine is. If I'm just making just terrible power or anything like that, then I know that this car probably doesn't have good compression, piston rings are just really worn down. So a dyno will kind of give me a good measurement of how healthy this engine is doing, okay? So now we're gonna head to the dyno and we're gonna do some pulls, and I'm gonna show you guys what our papers look like. And here are our 3 dyno pulls, okay? As you see here, we are generating at our best pull. We pulled at almost 239 foot-pounds. That's actually really good. Now, what our horsepower is going to show is a different story. We have, our best pull was about 215 horsepower, but the dyno will kind of show you something here. If you look down here, this is your horsepower going up, and if you look over here, this is your torque numbers, okay? In a perfect world, you want your torque to be as consistent as possible. You want that number, you want that line to stay as straight as it can for as long as it can. Horsepower will continue to increase as you increase RPM. The 52 number, 52, I think it's 52 or 52 RPM number is usually where the cutoff between horsepower and torque begin, and it's showing something for my car here. As you see here, and I have another dyno from years ago when I had my old G35. If you see here, right, our horsepower is dying after that 5200 mark. That goes to show that we are very restricted, and that we are not we're not getting good airflow at these higher RPMs. Not only that, I do want to mention his dyno jet was saying that it was cutting off at 6300 instead of going all the way up to the 65. Not that that extra 200 will make a big difference, but these are cutting off at 6300 RPM. But getting this baseline is very helpful, and it shows that as we begin to mod the car, we will really hopefully see a big difference from 5,000 RPM up as we begin to mod it and help it breathe better. You see that number there? It says what, 5.39, 5.45, 5 point. That means that's the RPM. So around 5,400 RPM, the engine is no longer making power, okay? That usually means that we have a restriction. That could be in our exhaust, that could be in our intake. We'll take a look at that in a second. But we have good, healthy numbers. Our torque, like I said, at 200 and about 239 foot-pounds of torque. So hopefully, a lot of people don't usually like to do base dynos because base dynos aren't fun. Not really, but I still had a good time. But anyway, having that base dyno will definitely help us understand how much of a difference we make from our mods and how much of a difference we'll see. Like I said, you guys, I do have another picture of my dyno I got back when I had my old G35. It made about 245 horsepower, which is a big difference from 200 and what, about 15. So we'll see as these mods go how much of a difference we make. I've already done some things to this car that I didn't do to the old car, so I'm excited to see what will happen as we put a new intake on here, new exhaust, possibly a bigger throttle body, and more. So we'll see. Stay tuned, you guys. Thanks for watching. Till next time, out. Bye.